All right, so I'm here today. I'm going to be talking about Forge. I've got some requests to do some kind of overview videos and give you examples of how the software operates. So that's what we're doing. Starting off, I'm just going to give you a general overview. Go over the lay of the land, so to speak. So you open up Forge. This is basically what you're going to see. All right, so you may see. I think this is what the window is that's set by default. But there is a more simplified version. If you go to the B tab, and this is just going to show you the single sample randomization engine, which if you're in A, it's all still there, just kind of laid out a little bit differently. All right. So if you just want to, sometimes you just want to throw in a sample and start working. This is very simple. I've already got something in there, but just to show you, it's drag and drop. So cool. I got the spinning wheel there. Let's see if that makes a difference or not. Hello. Come on. All right. So drag and drop, or I'll change the sample just so we can see something different. All right. So you drag your sample in, and then you can start, you can start playing around with it then. All of the buttons and knobs are MIDI mappable. You just have to right click, MIDI oscillator learn, and then touch or turn the knob or press the button or whatever to map. So I do have a controller mapped to these. So you'll be seeing me use my controller more often than, clicking some of this stuff. So everything's mappable. Okay. Back to my more advanced mode here. So first important thing, let's talk about what makes Forge unique compared to this boom arm. Let's talk about what makes it unique compared to some of the other ensembles that are out there. Okay. I'm certainly familiar with many different Reaktor ensembles that do similar workflows. And so prior to making Forge or using Forge, I was already using some other things. So a lot of this is improvements that I saw that I wanted to make for my workflow. So hopefully you'll enjoy a lot of the things that I decided to do with it. So first thing, this is probably the most important, is let's just talk about which effects you're actually able to randomize. What is being randomized when you are working with Forge? So you have 4 primary effect types. You have pitch, impact, timbre, and then of course timing. All right, so zoom in on those quickly. So as you turn the knob up on any of these, you're basically increasing the range of what's possible for randomization. All right, I'm going to be saying randomization a lot, just disclaimer here. So as you increase that range, you basically are, well, let's just show you. How about that? I got a sample loaded. So let's increase the pitch range a lot. Okay. Trigger. Right. Okay. So we can see that there's a pretty wide range that's possible there with that knob up all the way. And the same is going to be true for these. So impact, you can think of that almost like a transient designer. So as you increase the range, the more it will actually affect the content dynamically. And then the timbre, that's a series of filters and EQs that will randomly change their positioning depending on that range. Timing is kind of a clever sort of delay effect. I say that loosely. It's a little more complicated than just being a delay, but not worth getting into just for an intro video right now. We'll come back to some of these other parameters here, but that's basically what you're randomizing when you are working with Forge. The other thing you're randomizing potentially is the samples that you have loaded. So in your sampler down here, we actually have 6 separate samplers. Each sampler, you can load up to 127 samples, and then each layer randomizes independently. Okay, so that's one kind of unique thing here that's going on that really increases the possibilities a lot. So every time you hit the trigger button, you're randomizing the effects. Every time you hit the random button, you could be randomizing the samples in the sampler down here. Okay. Now, how the randomization process is actually triggered. Okay. This is a huge thing here. This is mainly how Forge is going to be very different than some other things you're used to, aside from what I've already mentioned. What I have here in Forge is an input analyzer. Okay, so this is actually what's in charge of talking to the randomization engine and telling it how often to randomize these effects up here. Okay, follow? So, depending on how this is set, and actually to give you a very clear understanding of how this works, is it's essentially the detector circuit. I just ripped it out of a compressor. So now instead of, when samples go above the threshold triggering a compressor, it's sending out a signal to the randomization, and it's telling it to change the randomization values, or basically the values of your pitch and so on. It'll change those. So depending on how you have that set with your threshold and your release time, you can actually be triggering these effect randomization properties multiple and many times. Okay, so you can get some really, really crazy, interesting effects by taking advantage of the input analyzer. Now, on the other hand, the input analyzer does have a very, I would say, well-defined aesthetic to it. So it is kind of, once you've seen what it can do, it's not something you always want to use. So you can also go into the master control section and you can turn on one-shot mode. So one-shot mode will basically just override the input analyzer section, and each time you trigger, it'll only randomize these parameters one time. All right, so that's an optional mode there. Now, while we're on the topic of randomizing your layers here, you also have this option, the process layers together button. So when that's turned on, you'll be randomizing all of these samplers together. So basically all these samplers will be receiving the same effect parameters when you hit the randomize button. With it off, each layer is receiving its own set of values for randomization. So basically, to simplify it, with this on, you're getting less chaotic results. With it off, you're going to get a lot more chaotic results. Okay. Back to the input analyzer, just to kind of go over the rest of what's here. The input analyzer is going to work based off of what it's seeing, the combined output of all 6 samplers. So all 6 of these samplers are going to a mixer, and then the stereo output of that mixer is going into the input analyzer, and then that is triggering the effect randomization. Okay. Now, if you want to basically trigger the effect randomization all separately, so that means I could decide that the pitch should randomize more often than the timbre, or the timbre should randomize more often than the impact. You can basically bypass or override the main input analyzer by going down here and turning these on. So whichever one's turned on, it's going to bypass for that effect only. So if they're all turned on, then basically you have 4 separate input analyzers, in which again, you can get even more chaotic results or even more diverse results than what you would with just the standard input randomizer. Okay. Now, as if that weren't enough, wait, there's more, of course. You can also load a sample in to this side chain down here. Okay. And you could turn on to analyze the side chain. With that on, basically your input analyzer is now, again, it's a side chain. So now it's looking at whatever sample is loaded there and randomizing what you're actually hearing based on the sample that's here. Okay. Hopefully that's not too confusing. If you understand side chaining, then I think you'll be all right. It's just, we're not working with dynamics is what it is, all the difference is. All right. So let's see. Let me see what else is in the master control section I haven't talked about. Volume randomization. That is something you can choose to turn on or not turn on. So it's, and I guess in a way, you have different ways of controlling your dynamics. So there's that, or the input or the impact. There's a volume randomization knob here. So as you increase that, you're actually increasing. It's very similar to these other effect intensities. It's just a smaller kind of less used knob, perhaps. but you do have to turn it on for that to occur. Freeze randomization. Now, let's say you're going along, you know, you're triggering different things, and you get a set of sounds that sounds really cool, and maybe you weren't recording. I'm always recording generally when I work with Forge to be safe. But if you hear something really cool, let's see, I'm in single sample mode. So let me just trigger something. So let me put it in one-shot mode just for the time being. All right, so some of this. All right, so let's just say I like that, so I can freeze it, and then when I trigger again, it should be the same effect. All right, so freezing it, you know, is basically just preventing the randomized engine from generating new values. So it'll be the same values when you trigger it again. I already talked about this. Manual effects. Okay, so of course, all of these, the range knobs that you're dealing with here, we can actually go into the back end, click on manual effects, and then you actually have control. Here's your filters that are part of the timbre randomization. Here, hit and sustain, that's part of the impact or the transient designer, and then pitch wheel. So you can map all these things. Mostly the smaller knobs, I have them set to what I feel like is a pretty optimal setting. So I don't really change these a whole lot. But the pitch wheel, I will go in, I'll map that to a MIDI controller for sure. That way you can play with the pitch as you're randomizing as well. So you got the randomization happening, and then you also have the control of the pitch wheel. So just to kind of demonstrate. So here we go. Cool. So that can be a whole lot of fun, and it adds a really interesting performance element to the whole thing, really. So really great stuff. What else did I miss over here? Randomized mutes. That's going to have to deal more with the multi-layered sampler, which I'm going to save talking about the multi-layer sampler for a separate video, just because it's it will take a significant amount of time to really talk about it properly. But the basic concept I've gone over, you can, 127 samples per layer. Each layer can be its own bank of sounds, so lots of possibility there. Now, real quickly, just so I feel like it's one thing I have the sample loaded up, but let me go to the multi-layered sampler. So you do have to, if you want to change between these, you do have to engage or disengage those. So right now I have, let's see, I actually have one layer muted that I loaded a music file into. So I feel like it's easier to hear what the engine is doing with a music file loaded in there than it is sometimes with the sound effects, because it's harder to tell maybe what they originally were supposed to sound like anyway. But you know what? I'll just shut up and let you hear it. How about that? So let me go to layered sampler, okay, and come over here. Got this soloed. Turn the volume up. Okay. Just a little bit. All right, so you can hear it's already been going because I triggered it previously. So here's a re-trigger. So now you can see every time it crosses this threshold, it's going to randomize a little. All right, so that's pretty interesting and kind of wild. Now, check it out. What happens? Let me turn down the timing just because that kind of muddies the waters a little bit. Impact. Let's turn them all down in effect. All right, let's start over. Okay, so we'll just have it playing and then I'll begin randomizing it as we go. So let me go and turn impact up. So here we can see so every time it hits that, you're getting some randomization of the transients. Turn it down. Here's timbre. Okay, so that's some pretty wild timbre randomization there. Now, pitch is going to be really funky. Right? Sometimes, you know, with these demonstrations, you're really just at the mercy of what it's going to do. So I don't know how long it's going to take. All right, now here's a good section to do this. So you hear as it's randomizing the pitch or other parameters, it's changing wildly between values. So, you know, where the pitch might be right here, then it's going to jump to right here or up and down all over the place. So if you don't want it to kind of be banging on and off like that as much, you can turn the glide on, okay? So glide, so let me, there we go. So now with the glide on, going between the values is going to be smoother. And you can smoothen it more by turning this knob up more. So turning that knob up, you're basically increasing the glide duration, or the time it takes to glide from, you know, beginning to end, or from one value to the next, rather. Let me really crank the, I'm just going to crank it all up right now, so we can really just see what it does. All right. So glide off and trigger. So this is maximum randomization. It's going to take a second here before it starts triggering. There we go. All right, so there's a lot going on there. Now, it's going to get really interesting when I turn the glide on. All right, and of course I can play with the pitch while this is all happening. So you have some control over what's going on. All right. What else? Now here's the only problem is with this long song file loaded up in here. Well, I can mute it. Let me just mute that. All right, so that's muted for now. Now what else do I have? I do have some samples loaded in here. So let's just play with those just for just a minute, just to give you an idea. I think my explanation as far as the general overview here is about done. So really all that'll be left of the video is just, I'll kind of, I will tweak some things and just play around a little bit and just give you a chance to really just kind of see what Forge is, what you can do with it. All right, so I probably won't talk a whole lot, but just, you know, have a listen here. All right, so what's in this layer? I've got some impact sounds here. This is a bunch of stuff from a new library that I'm working on. So I'm just listening to this first layer. You know what? Let's put that back. Let's put some glide on. And these are laser-like sounds. Close that. Play with the pitch a little bit. All right, I can process layers together. So that's going to be one set of randomization values feeding all three of these layers. Let's turn the timing down a little bit. Turn the glide off. All right, so I think that should wrap it up, you know, more or less for now. So, you know, kind of stay tuned. I'm going to be going over the multi-layer sampler a little bit more in depth and in another video. And yeah, if you ever have any questions about Forge, you know, there is a demo, you can demo it out. If you go to my website and you go to the Forge page, there is a demo that you can download. It's going to generate a random tone every few seconds, but you can try it out for yourself. Always open to questions, and yeah, so let me know. Thanks for watching.